Why don't we get started then? So good afternoon and good morning. It is a little past 1 o'clock Central Time. And thank you for joining the May monthly product focus training. My name is Pete Lace. I'm the AVP of product management here at Hirose. And for today, we have two product refreshes. One is our DF60, which is a high current connector from Hirose here. And the other is our slim inline DF62W. So Mr. Chris Tubbs will kick us off with the high current DF60. So Chris, without further ado, sir, please go ahead.
Okay, well, thank you, Pete. Everyone, thank you. We appreciate your time, as always. Just for you, those of you who don't know me, I'm Chris Tubbs. I've been at Hirose a number of years. I currently work in the tech support department, and also I am still regional sales engineer for the Western region. So kind of wear two hats there. But to get started here, so we've got some pretty cool products. I mean, our DF60 and DF62W product refreshes on those. So we'll jump right into it with the Hirose difference in industrial applications. And we're going to kind of run this a little bit differently than we have. We're not going to get bogged down in a lot of dimensions and pin counts and stuff like that. We're going to go maybe a little bit higher than that on that. So, but Hirose brings a lot of products to the industrial application market. One of the ones we have currently is our CX series, or our AU1 series, which is kind of a rugged type C. It is designed for automotive type applications, but it doesn't have to be used there. Some of our DF63 and DF62W, which Zach will talk about, again, is more of a kind of a middle of the road board to wire type connector. It's smaller size, but it's still kind of a good connector. And then on what we're going to talk about, or at least what I'm going to talk about, is DF60, and it's more of a high power. So one of the things we want all of you distribution partners to remember is that Hirose typically has like a kind of a suite of products that we can typically bring to the customer that can kind of meet, kind of applications on a couple of different levels depending on what they're needing with it. So we're just not like a, board to wire type company. So onto our DF60, DF60F. So DF60 has been in the lineup for a number of years now. It's been a very stalwart connector. It does its job really well. There's been some changes to it. Changes meaning good, that we've actually added some variations to it in our finger safe version of it. And typically if something really isn't moving for Hirose, they tend not to make variations onto it. So DF60 by and of itself is a good connector for high power, high current type applications. And then for customers that do need some of the differentiation on it with the F, we can supply those as well. Some of the features there you can read. It does have a high current capacity of 65 amp, but that's kind of an ambient temp type thing. And so sometimes you just got to look at the wire on it. You can see the other key points to it. This is also, if anybody needs, it is UL, CUL, and TUV specifications, and we can give those as needed. So key features on DF60. So DF60, like I've said, is a high power wire to board and wire to wire connector. So both wire to the PCB and then an inline type connection. It can support the 65 amp per pin at 1,000 volts, but again, like I had said, it's at an ambient temp about 77 degrees. Depending on what the temperature does have to go to, it might have to be degated on that. And we do offer different keying options on this from a safety standpoint, just so the customer doesn't cross-mate connectors. Maybe they're using, their design calls for 2 3-pin connectors on there, and they don't of course, it could be really detrimental if it was, you had connector A going into connector B on that. So we do offer the keying options to prevent that. As you can see, some of our keying here, there's kind of just a block, or there's kind of a tab, so to speak, on it, or a corner. And so you can only get the one side into the correct. It's got to basically fit that housing onto it. There's also some color variations on this as well that goes along with the keying on it. Moving on to kind of our finger protect version, our DF60 stuff, there's actually, for customers that need, like when they're, and we have found this in some of the battery storage type stuff, when they're actually building the battery units and putting some of this stuff together, they have to wear really thick gloves. So some of these with the finger safe protection on it is kind of really important to a lot of customers at times. And there's actually, by UL standard, there's a, believe it or not, there's a finger that they use to test that, and it kind of is supposed to be a representative sample of a human finger that if they can touch any of the contacts with it, it would not necessarily be finger safe on that. So some of the other stuff, and both on the header, it's going to be finger safe on it, and also on the crimp socket side of it, and also if we're dealing with a inline crimp plug, there's the finger safe kind of applies to those versions of it. The finger safe would apply to those products as well onto it. They do sometimes need to put like a shrink tube because there is some amount of the terminal that is still exposed. So the shrink tube would have to be put onto it to make it completely finger safe on there. Some of the stuff with DF60FS and our right angle crimp sockets. So there's been instances of where, like on the upper left hand here, you've got this cable side kind of hanging out there. Sometimes it puts stress on the cable and it adds depth to the product, and sometimes they don't have that depth. I mean, it might be in an enclosure, like a rack system or something. And also in the standard right angle version, if you were using the right angle PCB connector and plugging into it with a straight crimp housing to it, there's very little room under that. So if the customer had, capacitors or other mounted components on it, it might be really hard for them to kind of design that in on that and still be able to use it. So some of the FS, since it's a right angle, we don't have the bend radius to contend with, and you don't have this sticking out. So it's much, much closer to the receptacle. And also in the case, if we were using a right angle plug, you've got all this now where it says parts can be placed freely under the cable. So right where it's kind of showing is there, if the customer did have other components on their PCB mounted components, whereas on the left hand here, you had almost zero clearance. Now all of a sudden with this option or this variation, you've got that room, and it actually can make or break a design on this. Some places, this is one application example on this, but I do want to, so the DF60 on this medical CT scanner was used kind of in the cradle and the gantry place on it. But again, something else with Hirose stuff, we do, like my first slide had said, where we had a number of different industrial application type products. This would be a good example where not only did DF60 fit into this design, also IX and PQ50 did as well. So we had those options for it. And when you do talk to customers or make customer calls on that, always be looking to see what else does this customer need that Hirose possibly has. And kind of instead of just going in there and selling, one part into that, you might be able to pick up two, or in this case, there was 3 different series that were actually designed into this. One of the big things that back in the day when DF60 was new, it was kind of, and we used to bill it as this, as a like internal power supply. So it was primarily coming from, and it was being used more or less in like white goods, washing machines, refrigerators, vending machines. And it was, you had the regular power coming into the unit, and then they would have to, depending on what they were trying to do with the power, there'd be a power inverter, and then DF60 would take over at that point with kind of pulling power off of the main power source up to it, and then routing it to wherever it needed to go. But yet we really can't pigeonhole just DF60 into like white goods, vending machines, stuff like that. It's got so much more application and so many more, different customer applications to it. So again, here, the takeaway here, we've got, industrial factory automation for some of the signal stuff, board to wire for signal, ZIF connectors, board to board, board to wire for power on this. And this is kind of what we're focusing on, or at least my section right now is the DF60. But we do, again, have another, there's a lot of stuff that can go into a lot of these types of products. Application examples are going to be robotics, servers, battery systems, power conditioners for solar, transportation robots, or factory automation robots. They can be definitely used in their medical, as we've seen on some of the CT scanners, and also in more like metalworking, servo amp and motors, where you're getting any type of servos or items like that, are going to be good places to look for some of these. So if you have any customers that are into this, it might be worth making, a call to them going, hey, I want to show you the new Hirose DF60 on these. If there is interest in that, we can definitely get into all the nuts and bolts of it down in the weeds, with different pin counts, stuff like that, tooling at that time. So, but the big takeaway is that I want to make sure that we have kind of these connectors for a lot of industrial type applications. So some of the robotic stuff, so this slide here kind of is going back to each one of these topics where it says robots, servers, batteries, all of these onto here. So in the robots, we were having customers like Boston Dynamics, iRobot, like the Roomba type vacuum cleaner, Sim Robotics, servers. We've had stuff with Dell, IBM, power conditioners, Amatec, Triplite, Eaton, and you can see some of the others here, medical devices. We had stuff in Abbott, Siemens, Johnson & Johnson. So there's a lot of applications that, and these are real world applications for this. So it's not, the applications are there. So again, if you can, think it's like, oh yeah, we've got some medical device customers, they might be needing these, those would be good customers to, at least if they're not already using it, maybe at least make them aware of it. So some of the success stories, we're not going to get too deep, but some of the stuff with like power conditioners, the DF60 on our first one here, the inline fit for the connection that it needed there. Some of the like temperature controllers, the DF60 was more robust than the competitor product. So Hirose brings quite a bit, in terms of kind of an across the board thing of either competing or exceeding, competitors' products on these. And other than that, are there any questions specifically that we could answer with DF60?
Let's see, Chris, I'm looking in the chat. No questions in the chat. So team, any questions for Chris before we hand it over to Zach?
Okay. And if any questions do come up,
I'm sorry, Chris, looks like one just popped up in the chat. Let me get to that view. 1 second. Question is, how much current per conductor?
It would be, yeah. Typically it's always per pin on Hirose stuff. Yeah. So that's 65 amp number was for like the single pin using 8-gauge wire. And that's again, but if we had and it's kind of depending on the wire gauge that's used. So say if it was down at, a 4-pin or something, a 5-pin, maybe it's only 25 amps per pin, but you can still do 25 amps per pin on that. So yes, it will be a per pin rating.
Thank you for your question, Jeff. Any additional questions? Thank you, Chris. Zach?
Okay.
Please let us know more about the DF62W.
If you insist.
Please.
Okay.
And thank you.
All right. Can everyone see my presentation?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
You are in presentation mode and we can hear you loud and clear.
All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Zachary Pease. I'm an electromechanical engineer out of Hirose's Downers Grove office, our headquarters. So real quick here, I just want to briefly recap as Chris just kind of went over. We have so many advantages to industrial applications, USB-C rugged applications with CX and AU1, and then Chris himself just went over the DF60 for our power offerings. And now I want to go a little bit of a more deep dive into the DF62W for our navigating narrow openings here. So the DF62W is a waterproof, slim inline connector for the internal wiring. It's very ideal for small spaces because of its size. And there is a list here on the right of some of our key features, but I'll be going more in depth on those in a second here on the next slide. So some of the more key features are that it's a slim and waterproof wire to wire connector with locking to ensure reliability. And I would like to clarify here that while it is primarily a wire-to-wire series, we do have wire-to-board options that are available for customers who need that. And then because of our design, it's capable of being routed through very tight spaces. And as I mentioned before, the wire-to-board connection can also be potted to help create a very waterproof system overall. And it can support up to 5 amps per pin at 250 volts, which is very good for the size of this connector, where many of our competitors struggle to get all the way up to that same amperage and voltage as we do. So just to briefly talk about the design here. So it's a IP67 connector when mated, and the seals do come pre-assembled into the housing here. They are just shown here in an exploded view just so that you can see the individual parts here. And then on the right here, you can see that we do sell a dummy pin for if one of our customers wants to get an 8-pin or a 7-pin connector, but still have the waterproofing, where normally the wire would create the waterproof seal with the gasket, but these dummy pins allow them to customize the number of pin counts they get. And then, as I mentioned before, a main feature of this connector is its small size and compact grid style contact layout. So you can push it or pull it through all these tight spaces, whether that's a metal conduit, a tight corner in a chassis, or through a pipe in a system. You can route it through all of those with no issue. And then also because there's no exposed metal in either side of the connector, there's no risk of accidentally hitting the chassis and short circuiting your connection and maybe blowing something out. So I've talked a little bit about the features and some of the benefits of the connector, but how are these features of the DF62W actually beneficial to some of our customers? So the compact design enables it to be used, as I just mentioned, in very tight areas, where maybe our competitor products are simply too large to fit, especially say inside a robotic arm, where there's typically very little space at these joints for wiring connections through, so that you can get all the way from the base to the tip of the arm, where you have the all of the motors in the joints there. So trying to get a connection through multiple joints can often be very tight on customer space, and as such, that space is really at a premium where they can't afford to have more than a certain number of wires, a certain amount of space to route things through. And also you can see here, maybe there's you have a autonomous ground vehicle inside the chassis where there's some narrow spaces, and the DF62W is also great for routing through those. And on a similar topic to AGVs, I want to give an example of the space and waterproofing benefit that was in a robotic lawnmower project that Hirose had. So one of our customers needed, or they had a robotic lawnmower project, and you can see here they had this two-board design. They had a power board that was a completely sealed enclosure, and then they had a main board which had connections to LiDAR sensors, etc. And the main board was subject to water intrusion from outside of the lawnmower. Say it was running on a wet lawn, or maybe it was raining when this was outside. The concern was that there would be issues, so that they needed to waterproof everything. So they went with the DF62W. So you can see here they have a DF62W to connect both the power board and the main board. So they have a continuous waterproof connection between the two boards, so water can't get to the power board and inside that enclosure. And then also, because they used DF62W board mounted connectors and potted that board, there was no water intrusion into the main board either. And even though it was wet and had potentially constant moisture in there, there was no issue of any short circuits or any other issues due to water ingress. And then briefly here on the left, there are some other connectors shown here in the project. These connectors, like the DF63W, the DF51, and the DF60 that Chris just spoke about, actually. These are all proven solutions for this kind of project, and they would be great theories to mention to customers who are working on this kind of project, or maybe something similar like a electric snow blower or a leaf blower, for example. Something for lawn use or maintenance care. So then, building off of that, here are some application examples, and this is by no means an exhaustive list. But like I said before, lawnmowers, electric tools, where you have very little space usually to move between the motor, the battery, etc. Home appliances can also use it because you need to have waterproofing for some of those. LED lighting, outdoor lighting, e-bikes especially, we see a lot of use and a lot of interest in the DF62W. Robot arms, as I mentioned before, food processing machinery, and medical devices. So building off on that, we have a list here that we've come up with of various customers that have sparked interest in this series, or work in those different industries that I mentioned on this previous slide. So for lawn mowers, for example, you have Greenworks. For home appliances, Whirlpool, Frigidaire, Kenmore. Medical devices, Abbott Labs, Siemens, Johnson Johnson, all companies that work in these different fields here on this previous slide that you could very well be interested in the DF62W if you have any business with any of them, or if you currently have any projects that you know of or may be working on in the near future with them. Good series to keep in mind if they have need for waterproofing or especially small routing through small spaces. All right, and at this point, I want to give it back to Pete to sort of wrap everything up and tie everything in a knot between Chris's and I's presentation.
Thank you so much, Zach, and you as well, Chris. I appreciate it. So team members from our distribution partners, we understand that you have many, many suppliers on your line card. And, as always, we appreciate your support. And what we're looking to do from this monthly product focus training onward is to kind of give you the so what in terms of why Hirose or the Hirose difference when it comes to the industrial space. And so, for example, if you're going into a customer and an I/O is needed for USB Type-C, we hope that you remembered that our USB Type-C portfolio offers the ruggedness. What you heard from Mr. Chris Tubbs is with our DF60 is that we do offer reliability when it comes to high power, not only with the finger protect, but also some other safety features as well. And then last but not least, please try to remember that when it comes to navigating narrow openings, please think Hirose first. Zach talked about our DF62W, but we have many, many product series that will help enable a designer when he or she needs to navigate a narrow opening with one of our connectors. So if you could please take a mental snapshot of this in terms of the Hirose difference for industrial applications, we would greatly appreciate your top of mind and your continued support. With that, let me see. There's no questions in the chat, but I do want to open it up to the team here for any questions they may have on the DF62W for Zach before we call it a day. All right, and with that 3-second pause, it seems like there's no questions. So again, we thank you so much for joining us this month, and Chris and Zach, thanks for wonderful presentations, and I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day.